I had the great honor of having my latest exhibition opened by Professor Vladimir Gradev. I'm extremely grateful to him for the time and attention he devoted to my art. He is a Bulgarian philosopher, theorist of religion, professor, and diplomat. He has specialized at the University of Paris, the European University Institute in Florence, the House of Human Sciences in Paris, the Netherlands Academy of Sciences, and the University of Venice. He is an honorary member of the Old Florentine Academy Collegio dei Nobili and is a member of the International Committee Les États Généraux de la Psychanalyse. In 2001, Vladimir Gradev was appointed Ambassador of the Republic of Bulgaria to the Vatican and Ambassador to the Order of Malta. The exhibition took place at the Boris Christov Museum, Sofia, Bulgaria, for which I also thank the director, Mrs. Dragostinova. Before I begin, I want to express my gratitude to Mrs. Dragostinova for this evening in which she brought us together, for the entire exhibition that she organized, and for this small oasis of culture, beauty, and spirituality that she created in the Boris Christov Museum. We see when we enter, and I can say that my whole day is like each of you, I suppose, a chaotic day with one thing after another. You came here with a little heavy step after the end of the day, and when I found myself in Boris Christov's home, when I entered the garden, and suddenly this calmness, serenity, feelings that intensified in me when we waited here. And I did well because calmly and after the conversations, there was also time, like each of you, I suppose, to contemplate these works of Dejan Petrov from afar, to see the large chromatic masses, to see the play of forms. I let them enter me to one degree or another, and then separate details attracted my attention. My desire to penetrate, to enter, to see the mise en scène, to understand this somewhat mysterious plot, to dialogue to some extent with the painting, to understand on the one hand what these three works are, to understand, as far as I can, of course, what is their meaning on the one hand. We will perhaps talk about this, what Dejan himself wanted to put into them. And the author's intention is one, but on the other hand, the works are already a fact. They have their own life and their own destiny. They speak to each of us in a separate way. On the one hand, what is their meaning as we could approach it, and at the same time, what do they say to each of us? How they provoke us? Can we enter into them in a way that they will speak to us? Here I will say that Dejan obviously loves symmetries. We see these are three triptychs. Three large triptychs with one small over here. Faith, hope, and love. Three is a number that is sacred, a number that overcomes the opposites, the polarities of the one and the two, which on the one hand reconciles them into something third and something new. A number that multiplied by 3, for example, in Dante's Divine Comedy, as Dejan did here, this is the number of Beatrice. a number that achieves the unification of the three worlds, the underworld, the here and now, and the afterlife. This is the number in which we achieve this harmony of body, mind, and spirit, a traditional number of healing. And that is why the wonderful performance of these splendid dances, these magical dances of Bach by Vasil, helped us here, in which we achieve, I would say, synesthesia. All our senses on the one hand to receive this calming, and at the same time to be provoked and awakened to some extent, to pass into a different dimension of our spirit. If we turn to Dayan's works themselves, we see that they obviously required a long time of work. They are not something that he did simply for a month or two. Obviously, a very, very long time of work is required. They also require from us a long, patient, careful contemplation and meditation, because on the one hand, it is the overall composition. On the other hand, there are many details in it that I would not say that one can see them all at once and to the end. But such were the works that Dayan was mainly inspired by, the works of Hieronymus Bosch. Here is his famous Garden of Earthly Delights, this large painting that is today in Madrid, which was made in the early 16th century by Bosch, and for which art critics, historians, spectators, and lovers have given dozens, hundreds of countless interpretations without us being able to exhaust them to the end. Undoubtedly, Bosch himself, like Dayan, meditated for many years on it. Bosch lived and met the greatest humanist of that time, Erasmus of Rotterdam, and undoubtedly was influenced by him in one way or another. Erasmus lived in his hometown for 3 years, and Bosch was influenced by his works and especially by the praise of folly or the praise of madness that we find in the Garden of Earthly Delights and in many of his other works. Bosch was independent. We know very little about him, but we know that he did not work on commissions, just as Dayan does not work on commissions now, which was extremely rare then, not so rare now, but a risky undertaking. Because how can the artist reach the viewer? Contemporary art, which we will have the opportunity to talk about with Dayan, is a free art at first glance. But at the same time, it has strictly confident rules. Strictly confident rules of a special art world, carefully maintained and guarded by curators, gallerists, and media, that has its own rules, its own game, its own big interests, financial above all. All this has somehow remained out of sight and has not interested Dayan in this particular case, which is admirable, for which I congratulate him, which is brave and daring. And I wish him the same with his works, with small steps, as Nietzsche says, whom we will see in a moment on the mountain in the midst of the Passion of the Christ. And yet, big changes are made with pigeon steps, with small steps, with independent and daring work. Bosch acted in the same way when he made this mysterious and so fascinating work of his that we can see in the Prado Museum today. We see on the one hand that this will be the paradise in the right panel, where paradise appears in a special form. The most striking is the pink color. The palm tree, which represents the tree of life. There is a fountain from which life flows and is born. It is in Bosch's original work. There is God the Father, but with the face of Jesus Christ in front of Adam and Eve, without any sense of sin. And at the same time, we see many different animals, some of them which emerge from this fountain of life, strange birds that fly. There is a cat, which has always amazed me in Bosch's work, which proudly carries a mouse in its jaws. That's even in paradise. The animals are animals, follow their nature. Life lives by devouring other life. The Bible does not say anything like this about paradise, but only says that God saw that this was good after He created it. Bosch does not tell us that this is good. He observed life as it is. And then, in the large panel, to briefly recall Bosch's work, we see a large number of various figures, forms, hybrid forms. Most of them are naked bodies in all sorts of poses, copulations, pleasures, cheerful, playful, jumping on horses around the fountain, bizarre forms flying in the air, and at the same time we have the feeling that they are all in a hurry, all are active. But all this does not seem to bring satisfaction and delight. It is as if we have found ourselves not so much in a garden of pleasures, but in pleasures that go crazy, as if in a big madhouse, I think. And to finally see in the third panel, a moralist will say, if you look at it, this is the madness of the children of Adam and Eve after the fall. Maybe there is no fall. Maybe this is the human fate as Bosch sees it. That's why we see in hell, where it seems to be the logical end of all these boundless delights and madness, the greatest, most diverse tortures. That's where music is the subject of torture. If you see, there are many musical instruments that serves as instruments of torture. We also have this mysterious image of the child. There is one of the most mysterious and fascinating images in Bosch painting, a strange image of a head with a strange look and people dancing on it, as if this is Bosch himself, I would say. And all this, to one degree or another, if we search, we could unravel the meanings, but we realize that the more we try to unravel them, the more we got lost in them. Since we live in a different time, this is also important for understanding what they undid. We live in a time where the key, the code, the meanings, the games that existed in Bosch time at the beginning of the 16th century is more than 5 centuries old. The key has already been irretrievably lost. It may have been lost even then. Perhaps even then, Bosch simply wanted the viewer, with the same laughter, with the same delight, to admit that he does not understand as the characters playing in this garden of pleasures. To get lost and to fail in these attempts. Perhaps even to build his own theories and meanings. Dejan did not get lost. He did not get completely lost. And what struck me, of course, I assume you did too, when you looked at this work, are the teddy bears. The teddy bears that displace all these naked bodies in Bosch painting. Why the teddy bears? Ever since I saw Dejan's work, I do not claim to have an answer. At the time of Bosch, the bear was always the most widespread image in our European mythology and folklore. The bear was always, as it is called in Latin, mala bestia, the evil beast, bad beast. Even in the Middle Ages, the bear entered into very close, but always very violent and carnal relations with the man. The great legend, myth, tale of the big hairy beast and the beauty, from which many royal families were born, for example, and so men gradually became men. As all this myth seems to tell us, when men managed to master this beast in European myths, to domesticate it, to control it, to ridicule it, to turn it into a circus entertainment. And even in my childhood, there were these bears who were led to the squares and made to dance standing on two legs. This whole heritage changed surprisingly at the beginning of the 20th century. When an American president, Theodore Roosevelt, went hunting one day, saw a bear standing in front of him, and refused to kill it. He felt sorry for it. He refused to kill it. A lot was written then about Roosevelt's nobility. He was an eccentric president, but he rather remained with a good name in history. Now we have an eccentric American president of a completely different type. Then a small merchant came up with the idea of making a teddy bear out of the bear that Roosevelt has saved. And since his name was Theodore, they named it Teddy Bear. In the 20th, in the 20th century, this became the most popular toy. At first, it was associated with the president, but that was forgotten. This became the favorite toy of children. In my childhood, there were no teddy bears, but there was Winnie the Pooh. But for many children, you can see that this is the toy that a child can crush, can tease, can carry everywhere, can do whatever he wants with it. At the same time, this is his best companion. It is always with him. He can carry it everywhere. The teddy bear is his companion, his buddy. With it, he shares everything and so gradually begins to master the world and himself through this bear, through this toy. This is, as psychologists call it, a transitional object between him and the world, to be able to communicate with the world and feel the lack of his parents, and especially his mother, a key object for his growth. To one degree or another in our reality, when we need a similar game, we play with similar type of bears. Maybe Dayan, from a much younger generation, also had a teddy bear. He may have been inspired by it. He will tell us it may have come from somewhere else. But what is most striking is that we have countless bears. We cannot count them. As many bears as there are bodies at Bosch's painting. Which reminded me of another moment in our growth. We could say that we not only have this toy, but when you see the children in kindergarten, for example, the child is not so much interested in his own toy as in his friend's teddy bear. He wants, he desires the other child's toy because it is, I would say, a desire of desire. He likes the other's toy more, he begins to imitate the other. And we all imitate each other in this way. We begin to imitate each other, ultimately having the same toy. And that is not good. This imitation of the desire of others, this desire to have what others have, and which is ultimately nothing more than the same toy that we have, and which Dayan shows us in his Garden of Delights. This gives rise to rivalry. This gives rise to jealousy. This gives rise to conflicts between us, which move our society and turn this garden of delights in which our life should be into something much different and much more conflicted. Thus, for me, the Jan established a connection between Bosch's painting and our time, our reality with images and symbols that come from afar, and that approach us and our time. Of course, the most essential thing in all this is the impact of these visual images that he aimed at us. And if I go in a few words, very briefly, to the central panel, and the most striking, at least for me, of these three triptychs, I would say the most impressive for myself, in one way or another. He transports us again, inspired by Bosch, inspired by van der Weyden. He transports us on the mountain that he sees from above, and in it and there he places the Passion of Christ, the suffering of Christ, a courageous move that requires effort from us to understand it and unravel it. But above all, it requires us to climb this mountain. The mountain seen from above has always symbolized an ascent, an elevation of our spirit. The elevation of our spirit vertically along the vertical axis of the world. The mountain peaks are the place where the sky touches the earth, where we communicate with the most sublime and supreme that has been given to us on this earth. If we look at it from above, as the Yan did, we see that it is connected also with the tree, we would say, from the great mythologies. I don't know if the Yan taught it exactly like that. It doesn't matter at all. We say that one is the intention of the author who made it, others are the intention of the work itself, and third are the reactions of each of us. From here, we can see it gradually expanding, and it is like a giant tree whose roots are in the sky and which gradually dissolve downwards. This is the great symbol of the cosmic tree, and among this landscape, when we start to look around, we see, in addition to the clearly distinct figures, Christ from the birth of Jesus, the Virgin with the child, his suffering, carrying the cross, the scourging, the crowning with crown of thorns, and finally the Pieta. This puzzles us on one hand. We see three figures again. Here among the books are the statues of the philosophers, of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. We see therefore also our attempt to master with reason. I said that here we always have the effort of the body, the spirit, and the mind. What affects our senses, what we try to master with our mind, and what liberates us so far with the real production of art. We see among the pile of books, when we come closer and look more carefully, the images of Nietzsche, of Jung, of Francis Bacon,
на Юнг, на Франсис Бейкън. Съвременният художник Франсис
the
Бейкън.
contemporary artist
Какво
Francis
виждаме?
Bacon.
Какво правят
We begin to wonder,
Когато
what are they
говорим за
doing here?
Ницше,
When we
веднага си
talk about
спомняме,
Nietzsche, we immediately think, if we open his book,
като отворим
Thus Spoke Zarathustra.
Неговото тъй рече Заратустра, Ницше казва, че Заратустра
Nietzsche
е
says
неговия
that
герой, който
Zarathustra,
10 години по-малко
his
от
great hero,
живота,
spent 10 years in the mountain from where he was preparing to descend to give his great message to mankind.
Самия Ницше
Nietzsche himself was a great amateur mountaineer, as Dejan told me that he himself is a great mountaineer. He received his great revelation in the mountain, where the secret revelation of the eternal return appeared to him.
Но особено не можехме да го сложим, когато Деян е разположил страстите
Dejan has placed the Passion of Christ, the suffering, and the Pieta in the third panel in the mountain.
да не го сложим
We
с
cannot help but connect
разположението
it
на Ницше
with the death of God, which
спрямо
Nietzsche proclaims with the mouth of the madman
неговата много
in the gay science.
и ние тези
These madmen,
много
all of
негови
us, who play in the other triptych,
и
and hear the death of God
много
echoes among us again, when we look more closely among these mountains, also
по-внимателно сред тези планини виждаме и отново живот.
again we see animals, ferocious animals,
Отново ви рече
wolves.
животни, вълци, вълкът,
The
символ
wolf, also a symbol of evil,
на
a
дълбокия
demonic beast.
грях, дори само да се помисли,
In Dante's Divine Comedy,
на Данте,
it is a she wolf who stops Dante from reaching the promised hill.
стигне до заветния хълм. Виждаме също така тук виждаме не само вълци,
We also see not only wolves, we also see many of these nuns and others who have sheep's heads.
овчи глави.
We wonder about the wolves,
Дали
if this is an expression of their nature or of some ambiguous characters,
двусмислени образи, които носят, или пък, както Исаи казва,
or as Isaiah the prophet predicts, because many of these wolves are also gentle, or they all,
вълкът и агнето
that a day will come when they will see that the wolf and the lamb will coexist together.
стоящи образи, които по-скоро
But either way, these are disturbing images that rather point us to Francis Bacon, who is famous for his crucifixions, in which the crucified one reached such a degree of decay. The body literally reaches the slaughterhouse. In the slaughterhouse, the meat is cut to such an extent, only the bones and the spine and all the ferocity of the crucifixion and the deformation of the images remain.
и цялата свирепост на разпъването и деформирането,
Deformation of the images, which Dayan does not do.
което
I would ask him about what exactly his deep connection with Bacon is, which to me is a bit mysterious, I admit to myself.
неговата с Бейкън, която е малко загадъчна, признавам за мен. Виждаме също така и централния образ,
And we also see the central image, which is the image of the psychoanalyst, the depth psychologist Jung,
който държи, който е в образ
who is in the image of a priest who holds his red book
държи
in front of him.
и отпред е неговата
Jung had a great spiritual crisis of his own, caused by the break with Freud in 13th and 14th year. And then he had some strange visions and dreams, which he began to record in his Red Book,
в тази червена книга, която първоначално е била черна, но след това в продължение на повече от 20
which was
години
originally black.
описва своите
But then,
сънища,
for more than 20 years, he copied his dreams and visions in calligraphic handwriting and made some very special pictures, which he then bound in a large format with red leather, and this gave the name to the Red Book, which he did not publish until his death.
червена, червена книга, която не публикува, не издава до смъртта си и тя е издадена очудващо. Той умира 61
He
година.
died in 1961. Surprisingly, it was published in 2009, that is nearly 50 years after his death, in which we find all this deep imagery.
Защото в нея Юнг слиза надълбоко в своето несъзнавано и той не открива собствените си
In the Red Book, Jung goes deep into his unconscious, but he does not discover his own complexes, which we could discover even in Bosch. He discovers with many figures, many strange images, incidents, stories, which now is not the time to tell. But he discovers the deep history of mankind. He discovers the great figures of the collective unconscious. He meets his shadow. It seems to me essential in this case that this ignited Dejan's visual imagination. Dejan, did you look at the big book with the images itself, or did you just chat with the ordinary edition, the pocket edition? I read the pocket edition, but I had the opportunity to look at the illustrations online. You look at it online, yes. But it is clear that this somehow ignited his imagination. It is, I would say, to some extent, the hidden key to his artwork, which he can tell us about a few words if he wants. And finally, we end with the last work. To some extent, each of them brings a surprise. It requires deciphering. It strikes us visually. These large masses must be viewed from different sides. For example, there are details that strikes us. Here what strikes me especially in the right panel is this light in the upper right corner, which seemed to me like some kind of aura emanating from the mountain itself. When you get closer, you see and ask yourself if this is not a satellite or an airplane. Because when we look at the starry sky, we no longer know whether we see stars or satellites, those that stand brighter. This is how Dayan makes this connection with us and with modernity. In the same way, it is here when we see the forest with its tropic, lush greenery. We see the play of contrasts between the blue, green, and brownish color of the bears. But this lush tropical forest in the great European imaginary, where Dayan was inspired by Jung, it has always been connected, as with the mountain, to the ascent along the vertical of the spirit. It has always been associated to some extent with the masculine, naturally. Here, the forest, with its lush greenery, with the lush vegetation that grows, has always been associated with the Great Mother as well, with fertility, with eternal femininity, and the birth of the spirit. At the same time, with these dense leaves, it shades, it prevents the natural, solar, stronger light, the light of the spirit, from penetrating. And it always remains a mysterious, secretly frightening place. The forest has always been a place of demons, temptations, strange events, strange events. We see that it is precisely in this extremely unusual, surprising place that Diane has again placed various scenes from the Passion of Christ. Now we are also in the month of the Great Lent, and it is appropriate to meditate on them and their meaning. Diane has placed here in the central panel the laying in the tomb, the appearance of Christ before the Virgin Mary here. Everything begins here with the Annunciation. And we know in the old tradition that the Annunciation, which we will now celebrate on 25th of March, during the Middle Ages, a long time in Christianity until the change of the calendar, on this day the world was created with Adam and Eve. Christ was incarnated to atone for their sin. On this day they also sinned and spent 6 hours in the earthly paradise. The earthly paradise was imagined exactly like this: a lush garden located on earth. And on this day they were expelled from paradise because they wanted to taste the forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. We see here how this paradise is starting to burn. We see the lighting, which perhaps express God's anger. We also see that this great tree is suddenly cut down by another lightning and thunder. And we ask ourselves whether or not this is the tree of life. And this creates a disturbance and anxiety in us. Among all these beautiful images and scenes, if we look a little closer, we see that here, what seems to us from afar like vines, when we look closely, we see cables. Cables that are winding. Aren't these cables that come from our time, our hypermodernity, and that are winding like the snake that was winding and that has penetrated this garden of paradise? And we see how this whole garden of paradise, with the tree of life, started from Bosch's garden of delights to end perhaps here. And here at last, with this I will end, so that this does not become too long, we see the last, the fourth triptych, faith, hope, and love. We see that Dayan has resolutely and courageously raised not only our spirit, as on the mountain, but has directly taken our cathedral, its dome, and raised it above the clouds. The clouds that have always frightened our imagination with their bizarre playing forms, and at the same time, the clouds that have always, in the tradition of symbols, have appeared the prophets or Jesus, who says that he will come on the clouds in all his glory. The clouds that have always symbolized the life that they bring with their rains, also the fertility of the spirit. And perhaps this is the reality and not what is down here, what we achieve during the liturgy when it is said to lift our hearts, to lift our spirit, to pass into the new time. And all this Dayan does it with contemporary images. Images that do not always require explanation as I tell them, but which affects us in a special way with their beauty. I would say these are also beautiful, captivating, fixative images.